Dr. Welcher, if you could take us back to slide 30. And so we understand you mentioned there were two triggering events. Is this the first one or the second one?
The first one,
Is that the one you've labeled the three-point turn?
correct?
And where did that happen? What street?
Cedar Crest?
At this three-point turn triggering event, there is a time in red, 12:23:38.
Correct.
Where is that time taken from?
That's coming from the cell phone of Mr. O'Keefe at .154.
Okay. And is there another time on there?
I mean, I do the math between those two.
Okay. Could you make that a little larger? Could you zoom in so we can
Sure.
see it better?
So there's an infotainment time of 12:12:36, I guess another time, to answer your question. Then we have,
The 12:12:36, what does that indicate? What's that relevant to?
that's when the text stream data basically turned on, plus or minus a little bit.
When you say the text stream, is that relative to when the car turned on?
Correct. Sorry.
Okay.
So when the car turned on, then we add the time for the trigger. So what we have is we have data in the text stream that shows the speed, the position, the steering of the vehicle on that trigger. And so we're trying to match the timing and the description of what the vehicle was doing with the text stream, the infotainment, and the cell phone data.
Is the data that you analyze regarding the speed, the direction, and the timing to determine whether this was consistent with a three-point turn?
Yes.
Okay. Continue, please. And if you can enlarge that, because it's hard to see back here.
Sure is. Okay, so again, we are looking at event 1162-1. The information in blue is speed. It comes out of the text stream in kilometers an hour, converted to miles per hour, feet per second, looked at the total distance traveled, shift position. So in the text stream data, a shift position of 1 indicates you're in drive. A shift position of 2 indicates you're in reverse.
There's no zeros. What would a zero indicate?
0 is usually neutral, and I believe 3 is park. So there's also data on the acceleration of the vehicle. So basically, what is the effect of whatever you're doing in terms of stepping on the gas or not stepping on the gas? And then there's also information on the steering of the vehicle. So again, there's trigger 5 seconds before, 5 seconds after. So over here, a positive number equals a leftward steer. So you can see we have in the forward velocity or forward motion in drive, goes forward with leftward steer, stops, shifts into reverse, and then continues with the rightward steer back.
Could you take us over to the left of that data? When you look at the number 1162-1 as an event, can a key cycle, or when a car is turned on, power ignition on until the point it's turned off, whatever amount of time, can it have more than one triggering event?
Yes, you can have lots of triggering events. In this case, it has 2. On a key cycle 1164, there's 11. On 1167, there's 10.
If you could move a little bit to the right on this, is there something you can see on here that caused the triggering event, some of the data?
Yes. So if you look at the triggering, the indication of what this trigger was, what you see is accelerator opening ratio, which is basically, you can think of it as how much you're stepping on the gas pedal. And so if it exceeds, in this case, 30% quicken time after shifting into reverse, that tells the system, hey, we might need to start recording this data. So what you can see, it went into reverse, and then within a very short amount of time, the accelerator pedal went above that 30%. That's what caused the T or the trigger in the text stream data.
The row next to the 31.5, engine RPM data, can you explain to us what that is?
Sure, that's how many revolutions per minute the engine's turning.
The more gas, is it generally the higher the RPM?
Correct. There's going to be a little lag. Your car doesn't move instantaneously. You have to step on the gas, then the RPMs go up, and then it starts going faster.
If you could explain to us the total distance and distance travel columns, how do you read that?
Sure. So we know the speed at various times. We know from this data that there is, you can see half a second between each one of these timestamps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 data points at half a second. That's the 5 seconds of pre-crash data. So if you know you're going so many miles per hour, again, I converted it to feet per second. Feet per second, you're going so many feet per second for half a second, for example. You just multiply those two together and it tells you how far you went. So what I'm doing is looking at speed traveling during the interval, that's during this short time period, and then I add it all together here for total distance traveled.
You mentioned that when the data is captured, it's limited to 10 seconds. When we look at the top row of JBW vehicle speed MPH, it's 9.94. Is that 9.94 miles per hour?
It is.
Can we tell whether it was going faster or slower before this data?
We generally cannot. I mean, you might have some, it looks like it's slowing down. And then you see right here, this brake switch application. So you have two things relative to braking. You have a brake switch, which is simply whether the brake is on or off, just enough pressure to make the brake light come on. And then you have brake oil pressure, which gives you some idea of how much pressure is in the system, which is a rough indication for the braking. But then what you see here is the longitudinal acceleration or deceleration. This gives you some idea of how much the vehicle is speeding up or slowing down. So generally a minus sign is a slowing or accelerating in reverse.
And for the bottom of those columns, I'd asked you whether or not at the beginning of the window, if you had any other information, is it the same situation for the end of that window that's captured?
Correct. So at the end of this window, you can see it's still going about 8.7 miles an hour when the trigger stopped. So after that trigger plus 5 seconds, the system said we no longer need to monitor it. Things have returned to an okay state. And so then it stops monitoring the system.
Based on your analysis and review and looking at this data, did you come to a conclusion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether or when this event occurred as it is portrayed in the data?
Yes, I did.
And could you share with the jury, to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, when did this occur?
So this, you want time-wise or location or both?
Start with location, then time.
So it happened on Cedar Crest. It happened between cell phone data points 154 and 155. And it's a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest. And it occurred, according to the text stream data, about 12 minutes, 23 seconds after the vehicle was turned on. So.
And do you have an understanding of the variance between the Lexus clock and Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone?
Yes.
And what is that variance time?
21 to 29 seconds.
And so the Lexus clock at 21, 23, 38, what time would that put Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to see counsel at sidebar for just a minute, please.